All right. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda provided. Mr. Leonard, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Lee.
I'm here.
Commissioner Weich.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Weich. Commissioner Hammerschmidt. Commissioner Abrams.
Here.
Commissioner Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Adams.
Here.
Commissioner Norton.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 23, 2025? Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. We're going to move right on to reports from city administration and city manager. So we will first start with Councilmember Dish.
Thank you very much, Chair Lee. Very exciting news last night. Robertson Homes annexation of the 6.3 acres that will provide a much needed, a much sneezing housing typology did go through, yay. The street vacation for Cornwell Place, also done, and passed on first reading is the Hickory Way 3 project, otherwise known as 1146 South Maple. So that's first reading. It'll come back with a site plan, and that will also, I'm pretty sure, pass, because who doesn't want 100% affordable housing?
Great, thank you. Manager Leonard.
Also last night, Cornwell Place. Oh, you did? I'm sorry, I missed that. My apologies. I should have known better. My apologies. I'll leave executive committee. There was an executive committee meeting if Chair Lee would like to address that when you get to other members. I do want to draw your attention to there's an additional correspondence that we received after packet deadline, so that was printed out and put at your table. I also want to draw your attention in the communication packet. There's a lot of conversation with the capital improvements plan at the last adoption time, so we thought it was a good opportunity to provide some additional follow-up on some of the topics that received the most attention for a little bit more context, and would like to schedule a work session with you in April. So we've provided some of the information, or sort of our best interpretation of some of the questions that came up during that discussion, some actions that we've taken, for example, and recalibrating our record keeping so that if the Planning Commission wants to identify capital improvement projects, that can be a source of origination. I do want to draw your attention that for the most well-rounded discussion, like if you could share any information or questions or requested topics that you would like to specifically discuss, if you could share that with us by March 11th, you can provide that to either me, to Deputy Manager Kelly, or even just to the planning inbox. We'll compile all those so that Kayla and we can have the appropriate staff ready for that discussion in April. Also related to working sessions, currently, we have no topics scheduled for the March 11th working session. So if there are hot topics that the Planning Commission would like to dust off from your vantage point, we're happy to entertain those options as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give a quick update on our executive committee meeting. We talked about the retreat that we haven't done in actually several years. And then what we talked about was actually visiting some of the sites that we've passed just to see how it feels. We've been talking about, do we ride bikes? Do we get a bus, et cetera? But it'll be done kind of when it's nicer out, but it's for us to get a feel for essentially where are the conflict points and what's accretive to the overall comprehensive plan. So I think it's going to be a good time for us to bond, but also to take a serious look at what does 36 feet feel like, and then also to say, hey, for those of us that had dissenting votes, for example, on South Forest or on Church, on something that's 15 or 17 stories, what does it feel like right now, right? And so that's ultimately what we talked about, and it should be a good time for us to get together. I believe it was going to be during the week, so we will be reaching out, I think, to set up some dates, because we will actually have some of these staff there as well to kind of like guide us through, okay, these are some of the things that we see for waste removal, fire, et cetera. So, okay, with that, any other communications from other members? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we will, written communications are included in today's packet. We're going to move on to our first public comment. This is an opportunity for individuals to speak up to 3 minutes on an issue that's not listed as a topic here today. We'll first hear from those present and then those remote callers. To speak remotely, please press *9 if on the phone or use the raise hand feature if on Zoom. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will identify callers by the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name for Zoom users, and you'll hear an automated announcement when it's your turn to speak. And please move to a quiet area and mute any background noise. Do we have any present that would like to speak at this time? Oh, all right. Seeing none, do we have any remote callers?
Remote callers, but nobody indicating a desire to address the commission at this time.
Gotcha. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, we're going to move on. Thanks. Well, with that, we're going to close the first public comment. You will have a chance to speak at the end of the meeting as well. We're going to move on to public hearings scheduled for the next business meeting. Mr. Leonard.
Yes, you have 3 new public hearings scheduled for the March 4th, 2025 meeting. The first one is 1209 South University Avenue. This is a proposed site plan to construct a new 19-story mixed-use residential building with ground floor retail on a 0.39-acre site, Zone D1. The proposed development includes demolition of the existing retail buildings and reconstruction of the pedestrian corridor along Church Street and South University Avenue. The site is located in Ward 1. Second is 343 South 5th. You might know it as the Downtown Library. This is a proposed rezoning from public land to D1 zoning to pursue a future public-private development. No development is currently proposed. This is just considering rezoning. It is a 1.21-acre site, including the library building and the adjacent surface parking lot. The site is located in Ward 5. And then finally, 2325 Crystal Way. This is a proposed rezoning from R4A to public land zoning. The lot was recently acquired by the city for an expansion of the Hickory Nature Area located in Ward 1.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to regular business. This is 215-217 South Main Street Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. This is a proposal to add 3,524 square foot addition to the rear of a 17,000 square foot or 17,020 square foot 3-story downtown and mixed-use building. The project will maintain 2 ground floor commercial spaces, 6,879 square feet, and add 8 2-bedroom residential apartment units, same size, 8,623 square feet on the 2nd and 3rd floors. This is D1 downtown core zoning, Main Street Historic District, Ward 5. We're going to first move with the petitioner presentation, and we have Joe Maynard here with Washington Engineering.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So this project is a reuse, as you noted, of an existing building downtown. The general contractor, Sam Kafai, and owner representative is online with us for questions later, along with the architect, Chris from Big Design, is available as well. Just a brief history. This project's gone through the HDC for the exterior renovations. The front facade of the building is being maintained just the way it was, with new windows meeting the HDC requirements. The front doorways, as you mentioned, the rear of the building is getting an addition to provide for staircases and additional residential living spaces. The utilities within the Main Street have actually already been brought in. When the city did the water main project, they already brought the utilities in, so we don't have to tear up Main Street again for water utilities. But the vaults in the front will be filled in according to the DDA requirements. The project has a long list of sustainable products or benefits to this. The roof is solar ready, though it's not nearly enough space on the roof to provide enough solar for the project. All of these requirements, I don't know if you want me to go through them all or not, but all were approved by the HDC as part of the project there. So we'd be happy to answer any questions regarding that. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's a new retail space with 8 apartments above it. So I guess I'll leave it really short and we can ask questions if you got them.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. That, we're going to move to staff presentation. Manager Leonard.
Good evening. I want to preface this by the planner who was working on this was unfortunately not able to join us because she was feeling ill today. So I don't profess to be an expert. So if for some reason we can't address one of your questions, we will be happy to follow up. But as noted, this is a pretty cut and dry site plan from my perspective. To start, staff is recommending approval of the site plan. We reference the appropriate date of that plan. No development agreement is required based on the nature of this site plan. There are no other external improvements that would mandate that necessity. The project was described, it's a 3-story addition that's going to maintain 2 ground floor retail spaces and 8 residential 2-bedroom apartments up above. It is, for those who didn't get a chance to go by, it's featured as a plywood wall right now in the middle of Main Street. The project, I would note one distinction, or not a distinction, but just sort of a note about the Historic District. Originally, a larger project was approved at that location by the Historic District Commission. The petitioner subsequently modified the project to a much smaller scale. So that modification was approved by staff for the historic district permit. That's why you might not have seen the specific version of this project at a historic district commission if you were going back and doing any research. The site doesn't have any stormwater right now, stormwater management or getting first flush protection as part of this improvement. So, which is, in a very tight project such as this without a lot of ground area to do much more. That's a great outcome. So with that, I'll do my best to address any questions along with the petitioner. And as noted, I see the architects online as well if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for the public individuals to speak up to 3 minutes on this item. We'll first hear from those present and then remote. To speak remotely, please press *9 if on the phone or use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And for phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will identify callers by the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name on Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement when it's your turn to speak, and please ensure you're in a quiet area and mute any background noise. For all participants, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Do we have anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Mr. Garber, good to see you again.
Chair Lee and everyone on Planning Commission. Sorry I've been absent for so long. I have made a point over the last 4 years to show up every time a petitioner comes in with a plan that does use fossil gas for heating. And I have a comment, first of all, about the sort of the ritualistic aspect of these presentations by the developers. It's almost obligatory for a developer who is essentially offering no sustainability features at all to claim that they are. In this case, he cited the solar-ready roof. I mean, I looked at the documents, a little while ago. It reads, although solar investment is not feasible at this time, provisions have been made in the roof design to allow the installation of on-site solar panels on the roof in the near future. Conduits will be run from basement to roof to allow easy wire pulling for future panels. Installation in the near future. Why not now? I mean, I find this a bit tough to swallow, and it sounds more like, well, we're pretending rather than we're doing. I mean, this is a small project, given the fact that the Trump administration is basically dismantling the EPA, the Energy Department, the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, I feel kind of silly making a fuss over this project. So I do want to put it into perspective. But if nothing else, let's call out developers for this ritualistic genuflection towards sustainability, when in fact, they're giving us nothing. Our 820 plan, adopted on June 1st, 2020, said assumed that starting in 2022, all new construction would be all electric and actually conform to net zero standards. Now, I'm realistic enough to know that most developers aren't going to comply with this and that you have no power to make them. But let's at least have some honesty at the table. I mean, that's the least we can expect. So, again, I keep this all in perspective. I'm sure this is a good development. We can use the housing. Dr. Ramani, I wish you well in your endeavors downtown. But let's at least be honest about what we're doing and we're not doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none present, do we have any remote callers?
No hands raised at this time.
Got it. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, with that, we will close public comment. All right. With that, we are moving into the proposed motion, which is that the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission approves this 215-217 South Main Street site plan, revision number 4, dated January 21st, 2025. Moved by Commissioner Weitz and seconded by Councilmember Dish. We are in discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off? Pretty straightforward. Commissioner Mills.
I was trying to look and see what other site amenities are being provided. I noted that there's bicycle parking in the front and in the back, and also inside. It appears that the bicycle parking inside is on the ground floor.
That's correct.
That is a strip that really could use some more bike parking on Main Street, and I'm sure that it's done in conjunction with DDA. Yeah. So I think that is a great amenity, particularly for an addition that the average person will never know is there. That may be the only thing that they see, and the wooden boards coming down on the front. So, yeah, I think that this makes sense.
Thank you. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. I'm just curious. I'm under the assumption that the second and third floors currently are vacant. There's nothing there right now. Sorry if I missed that in the staff report, but is the whole building vacant?
The whole building is vacant now, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm. So I'm glad that this will add some new housing downtown, and I like the size of 2 bedrooms. And I know that you had, I don't think that there was any way around this, but like those bedrooms, just having those interior windows, oh man. Hopefully people will be so excited to live downtown that they can get over that. But thank you. Thanks for this housing.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other commissioners? All right, oh yes, Councilmember Dish.
I'm sorry, I just got out of teaching, and so I'm scrambling. I wanted to note that in your sustainability narrative, you have item 10, and you have sketched out a pretty thorough construction and demolition waste management plan, and I wanted to note that and acknowledge that I really appreciate that. Which includes recycling, donation, and 90% of the demolition materials will be removed that are being removed to the site and being recycled and prevented from going to landfill. So that's great. I think there's probably some valuable material in that building because it's older. So And so you are really doing the right thing there, and I think that's terrific. So there's just something that I don't understand about the part where you talk about why not solar at the moment. And so it's just, okay, so over a 20-year period, a 5-kilowatt system in Ann Arbor could save about $25,000 on electricity costs, which is obviously not a lot. That savings is far less than the cost to install solar panels to generate enough power for the entire building. But I think that you already said that you couldn't, there wasn't even enough room to install solar panels to generate enough power for the entire building. So is the cost to install what you can just so excessive over a $25,000 savings that you're not even willing to just throw a few panels up there to set a, gesture? I mean, it would reduce something, right?
I guess I'd have to leave that up to the developer on that end. The cost to put the panels up there is a small percentage of the energy that's used in the building. And overall, the project meets net zero. It's all electric, it's all LED lighting. The only thing that gas is used for is heating, and it's a high-efficiency heating system that also uses the hot water to also, heat with. Architects online, I think he could probably give a much better explanation. I'm a civil engineer, not an architect, so if you want some more details, maybe we can see if Chris is available to give you more information regarding that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just a little bit more clarification of, despite the fact that you can't generate enough electricity to offset your use, which I understand that, you feel that it's better to not install solar for what you can. And I do appreciate that that you have all the high efficiency features of this building. I think that's great. So, but it wouldn't be net zero if you're using gas, right? Right. Just because. Okay. Thank you. But anyway, so yeah, I would love it if your architect wants to answer why. I know you can't power the whole thing with solar, but.
Go ahead, Mr. Biggers.
Oh, hello, this is Chris Biggers. I think to clarify is we've made all the calculations to run 100% solar. The issue we're having is we can only provide about 30 kilowatts where we need 70 kilowatts. So we certainly can add solar to the building. We just can't 100% power the building off of only solar without going through the energy company.
Well, I think that's fine and totally understandable, but then I would urge you to provide 30 kilowatts of solar. It's better than nothing.
Well, if you notice on the roof, we show that the building, we have solar panels on the roof. So we're just confirming we can put the solar panels up. We can't just provide the whole building, but we can certainly we can install them.
So they will be installed, or the roof will be solar ready?
It's designed to hold the solar units. We can certainly put them in at any time.
It would be great if the time were now, I think.
Well, I think we can just confirm with the developer that we can put them in.
Thank you for inquiring about that and urging it and reporting back, or however that would happen, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Councilmember Dish. Do we have any other commissioners that want to speak on this particular matter? Okay, I'm going to just add a few of my comments. This is D1 zone, 5,500 square feet of lot area, 372% FAR. It comports with side setbacks, actually none, pretty much throughout. As far as the D1 actual standards go, this complies, and it's got the HCC blessing. I do think it's a benefit that we get the first flush stormwater, on-site stormwater retention added here. That's certainly a benefit from the non-existence of it now. So being a by right request with historic district, I'm inclined to support this. So any other final thoughts from the Planning Commission? Okay, with that, we are going to move on to a roll call vote. Mr. Leonard.
Commissioner Norton.
Yes.
I surprised you. Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Commissioner Weich.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you. And please do consider installing the solar panels.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Once they can, how do we, I guess I'll get with you on how to respond to that then?
You could just make sure that they're included on your building permit plans,
building.
and we can verify that, and then we can report back to the Planning Commission on it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, with that, we're going to move on to Section 9B. This is amendments to the Unified Development Code related to the general entertainment use specific standards. This is going to be Sections 5.15 and Sections 5.16. With that, we're actually going to move to staff presentation. Mr. Leonard, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So on your agenda this evening are two sets of ordinance amendments. This first one is generated by myself. You may have heard recently that there was a proposed project under consideration that has the potential to displace a very beloved arcade. I don't know if you heard anything about that. But in the past, we have been very, very restrictive of where arcades can go. In fact, said arcade was a non-conforming use at that location in our downtown business district. In fact, it was only allowed in the C1A zoning district. C1A is currently limited to a small area around the intersection of Packard and State and the former Angelo's restaurant. So those would have been the only locations in the city in which a coin-operated arcade business could operate within the definition of the general and entertainment use. This seems unnecessarily restrictive to me, and so I present to you a proposed amendment that would have the effect of allowing it in all of the other places that general entertainment uses can be permitted, which is basically all of the mixed-use zones excepting office. And in doing so, it left a bit of an island, if you will, of the additional use standards that it referred to that would also leave what I think is also unnecessary restriction on theaters being limited to 600 seats in the C1B zoning districts. And so rather than being too scalpel-like in addressing the arcade, I am being more blunt and proposing the elimination of that entire section of additional specific standards, which would allow theaters of larger than 600 seats in C1B districts, and it would allow arcades in places like D1, D2, and all of our commercial districts. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, with that, we're going to move on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for individuals to speak up to 3 minutes on this item. We'll first hear from those present, then remote participants. To speak remotely, please press star 9 on the phone or use the raise hand feature on Zoom. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will identify callers by the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name for Zoom users, and you'll hear an automated announcement that it's your turn to speak. Please ensure you're in a quiet area, mute any background noise, and for all participants, please state your name and address at the beginning of the comments. Anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, do we have any remote callers?
No hands raised, Chair Lee.
All right, as always, we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, With that, we're going to move on to the motion. I'm going to close public comment. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Sections 5.151 and 5.163, to remove the use-specific standards related to general entertainment uses as proposed in the attached ordinance. Moved by Commissioner White and seconded by Commissioner Mills. We're in discussion. Who likes arcades? Commissioner Mills.
I do like arcades. This reminds me of the zoning simplification effort that we did in starts and stops on ORC a while ago. It makes me kind of want to go back to see if this is one of the things that we'd flagged, like where did this come from? At what point in time? I don't expect the history of that. I feel like that there was clearly something that led to this particular thing. Thank you for doing more than just the bare minimum necessary, and also like how many other things like this do we have that we could work towards simplification on? So
1 or 1,000.
I know. So thank you for taking them as they come and not only doing the one line, but making it 4. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Do we have any other commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Norton.
I'm just curious, do you know why those provisions were, what is the history of these?
No, I don't know. But when you look at the land use category, it was basically only at Packard and State. So there must have been some historic perspective that it was only appropriate where there's a high concentration of U of M students, is my best guess. As far as the theater, I don't know, but whenever I see something like that in the code, it suggests to me that there was some land use or project that was proposed and there was a pushback against it. There was a concern. I hate legislation like that. You see it in the state level as well, like this law applies to everybody, but communities of 13,406 to 14,708 north of the whatever parallel. So that's my best guess. I don't know more details.
I was just curious.
Yeah, maybe a good student project sometime.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Just, was there trouble here in River City that made it so that they didn't want a pool hall or a pinball arcade or a big old movie theater?
It very, very well could be. General entertainment's a pretty big, broad category. A lot of things can fit into that. It actually reminds me of a previous community I worked in. Tattoo parlors had a locational restriction from one another, and I think that's another land use example where historically communities sort of were scared of it, and now it is so commonplace. So it's probably in that same vein that there was some concern that pool halls and arcades were damaging the minds of the youth of America, and we needed to make sure we zone that stuff away.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioner White.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Leonard, for doing some unzoning, and I welcome more unzoning. You were looking for agenda items for our March 11th working session. You could propose anywhere between 1 and 1,000 unzoning recommendations that we could consider. Thank you, sir.
Any other commissioners with thoughts? Okay. With that, just a procedural clarification. This recommendation gets advanced to City Council, and so as it's a UDC requirement or a modification, it will go to City Council and go through 2 readings. Other than that, pretty straightforward. The only other clarification I want to make is even if this gets removed from the zoning, that the building department and building standards of fire, auditorium, et cetera, will still apply if somebody wants to do a 1,000-seat auditorium. So
absolutely apply today and would continue to.
Perfect. All right. With that, we're going to go on to roll call vote. Mr. Leonard.
Commissioner Norton.
Yes.
Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Commissioner White.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're moving right on to Section 9C. This is amendments to the Unified Development Code related to the Design Review Board. Design Review and Design Review Board, this is in Sections 5.17 and 5.27 and 5.28. First off, we'll move on to staff presentation. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. So this ordinance amendment originated from a different source. In 2024, the City Council received a report authored by the city administration entitled "A New Approach to Economic Development." And I think this report has been shared with you previously. It's of course publicly available, and it was just that, a series of recommendations on how the city of Ann Arbor might start thinking about economic development perhaps differently than it had in the past. The report was founded in a lot of looking back at history of real estate transactions, how the city had roles or not had roles in some of them. For example, you might recall the publishing company on South State that the city council historically had sort of wrestled with whether or not to take a more active role in purchasing or dictating what could happen at that site. The report was also generated with input with a series of interviews that were not conducted by planning staff, but rather other city staff members from other departments with architects, developers, engineers, trying to understand some of the ways that our process for just accomplishing development was working well and opportunities to maybe improve it. Out of this report came a series of 4 resolutions, and one of these resolutions was to implement new processes and programs for housing development at all income levels to support housing affordability. And very explicitly in that resolution, which was adopted in April of 2024, a series of recommendations was made to basically work on streamlining, improving, adjusting our processes to perhaps make them more cost-effective, more quick, so that when the city is laying out expectations and desires for development, we have a faster pathway for the private sector to meet those. Time and uncertainty are challenges to developing period. And so whenever we as a community can be clear and forthright and quick with our review and decision making on projects, that is going to make it more easy and potentially more affordable. One of the specific recommendations of this resolution was a series of process changes intended to adjust some of the upfront requirements of the development review process. One of these is to amend the ordinance so that hearings before the design review board are no longer required, and that becomes a function of planning staff's review of that ordinance. And so, in short, that is the origin of this proposed ordinance amendment that's being presented to you tonight. The proposed changes would eliminate this appointed board, the design review board, which is currently created in the Unified Development Code. And you will recall we presented a version of this to a working session previously, and one of the questions that was posed to this board was, should we in fact not only follow that direction, but eliminate the design guidelines altogether? And your feedback was a resounding no. Those design guidelines do have a value to consider against projects. So what this ordinance here intends to do is to be a more faithful response to that direction of the City Council resolution. It maintains the design guidelines, but as noted, it would incorporate those into basically the information that we are providing to the Planning Commission or to the City Council, whoever the body is that's approving the site plan. This will render time savings to projects, because right now that is a requirement that has to happen. Basically, it adds a month to the process before a project can come to the city. You have to go through that requirement before you can submit a project to the city. And by eliminating that requirement and making it concurrent with our technical review of the site plan, we eliminate a month off of the review process for projects that are required to go through that, which are basically in the downtown and not in the historic district. Just as a reminder, as currently configured, the design review board and the design guidelines were intentionally set up to be non-binding, and they remain that way. These were put in place shortly after sweeping changes to our downtown zoning district, the creation of the D1 and D2 zones, and they were very purposefully, there was a debate, but they were very purposely made to be advisory. I think for good reason. When you want to make something binding, you have to measure it. You have to be prescriptive. And that's going to add a sense of rigidity to design that I think is frankly, I don't know that would achieve the results that people are looking for either. You will have seen a lot of communication on this, some from the design review board as well, members as well. And, I think I don't want to speak for them, but I think some of the feedback that they would, that I summarized from that is taking issue with some of the conclusions that were in that economic development report, that a staff review of applying those standards to a project has a similar outcome and benefit as a board of varying professional perspectives having that same conversation. At the same token, I would say that one of the things there have been projects that, have changed from that advisory conversation of the design review board. There have been projects that, in my estimation, were improved from that process. There are projects in my estimation, I don't think were that improved in that process. I think it's frankly somewhat of a subjective outcome. And more generally, and it sounds flippant, but I don't hear from the community celebration of the architecture that's coming out of this process in our city. That's not something that I'm typically hearing, that people love the architecture that's being built in this town. So the opportunity to streamline that process to maybe meet some of our other goals, such as affordability, sustainability, as we find ways to memorialize those expectations into code, that's the premise of these proposed changes. I want to be clear, there's another change, a series of changes that's presented here that are totally staff-driven, and that is changes to the proposed materials requirements that apply in the downtown. Those are not specifically addressed in the report or the resolution. It's something that's come up recently in a couple of cases where in projects that are seeking to improve their efficiency, they have sought to use a building technology called exterior insulation finishing systems, or EFIS. And EFIS frankly has sort of a bad reputation in the planning aesthetic world. I'm sure it can be used well, but it can also be used in some of the blandest strip malls and chain pharmacies that you probably can imagine across the country. But it does add a building material that provides an energy efficiency tool that if we don't allow it, we're not providing that as an opportunity. So staff has specifically added proposed language into this draft that would allow that. And I just want to be really clear. I think it is taking a bit of an aesthetic risk with our community to provide more energy efficiency potential. I think that when you're thinking about that particular aspect of materials, I posit to you as well that if we are going to be very broad in allowing all these materials, be it EFIS, be it wood, being all the materials that are already there, another avenue is to just eliminate material restrictions and requirements altogether. is if I think that there is probably some history and basis for trying to restrict EFIS by adopting those in the first place. And if we want to open it up to that material, another method might be just to the unzoning conversation, just eliminate material requirements altogether. I'll stop there, address any questions you have now or after of course, during the deliberation.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to public comment first, so yeah, we'll get to discussion in just a sec. Okay, with that, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Leonard. We are moving on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for individuals to speak up to 3 minutes on this item. We'll first hear from those present and then remote participants. To speak remotely, please press *9 if on the phone or use the raise hand feature on Zoom. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will call on will identify callers by the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name on Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement when it's your turn to speak, and please ensure that you're in a quiet area and mute any background noise. For all participants, please state your name and address at the beginning of the comments. Is there anyone present who would like to speak at this time?
Lee, Ken Garber, I didn't identify myself last time, 28 Haverhill Court. Yeah, I don't know anything about building aesthetics, but I am one of those people, as Mr. Leonard mentioned, who is not celebrating the overall aesthetic quality of our recent buildings downtown. But I don't think it's fair to put that on the Design Review Board. I think that, as Mr. Leonard pointed out, these are completely non-binding kinds of discussions. It's meant to be collegial and friendly and reach a rapport between the petitioner and the expert design review board. And also, I would like a little bit, perhaps more explanation about why this delays the process a month. This happens very early in the review process. I mean, I would assume that the other submissions and reviews can be going on concurrently with this, and that, you know, maybe there is a week or two, I don't know. But I think that begs a bit more explanation. Not saying it's wrong. I would just like to hear more. I spoke to I contacted one of the design review board people, and they told me not to bother showing up tonight. Not because they don't like you guys, but they don't feel they have the votes on city council to save the board. But I'm going to quote from the letter anyway to city council. Most of us on the DRB have spent our professional career sitting on the petitioner side of the table. We understand that. The process is onerous from start to finish, and if it could be streamlined by eliminating a step, such a change should be considered. The questions become, what will we give up by doing that, and what would be gained? And they go on, petitioners would bring design thoughts that were still in the early formative stage before extensive architectural and engineering fees had been spent. Since that tends to make petitioners dig in their heels, the intent was to make the actual review a collegial experience. So what would we be giving up? They write that some petitioners do ignore the board. However, other petitioners have embraced the process. They typically ask for a second visit to discuss the process more fully. And DRB has had a significant impact on the quality of those designs. And so forth. And they offer 2 examples, the Varsity and Carytown Place, and they include some renderings before and after. Other benefits are the public discussion of design that increases the demand for good design as the public becomes more aware. The planning staff learn how a group of diverse professionals approach design and how it can be balanced with the feasibility of a project. This is what we would be giving up, and what would be gained. As we understand it, it's only a few weeks that a small number of projects, only in the DDA district, are currently required to include in the approval process. Is this worth what we're giving up? Signatories: Jeff Perkins, Laurie Singleton, Tamara Burns, Bill Kinley, John Katarski, Richard Mitchell, Wendy Ramson, former Ann Arbor Planning Department Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Do we have anyone else present that would like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, do we have any remote callers?
No hands raised, Chair Lee.
Thank you. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, with that, we will close public comments. All right, I'm going to read the proposed motion again for clarification. This is a UDC modification. This is simply a recommendation to City Council. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve amendments to Chapter 55, Unified Development Code, Sections 5.17.6 and 5.27.5 and 5.28.5 to eliminate the design review board, modify the design review process to an administrative function, and revise the downtown building material regulation as proposed in the attached ordinance moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. We are moving on to discussion. Anybody want to kick us off? Commissioner Mills.
Tonight is the night that I will raise my hand first. Okay. A couple of thoughts on this. So there were a lot of communications, or a number of communications in the packet, and one of them pointed us to the last design review board meeting, and so I watched parts of it. Actually, I didn't think about that until sitting here tonight. My understanding is the proposal is to do away with the design review board for all types of buildings. On that particular meeting, they were talking about a hotel. Like, the directive is really aimed at housing, and there's a number of other buildings that come before us. And so I think it is wise. I think, again, understanding how we can reduce barriers for the things that we want to see are really important. And I'm curious how we ought to think about this in light of doing away with the board that goes beyond housing. So that's one thing that struck me. The other thing that I just try to deal with from my day job is the idea that it's way easier to incorporate feedback when you hear it early. That once the project is fully cooked, it is really too late. And that's when it's really hard for a developer. And it's unfair for a developer to bring things up at the last minute when they've already fully cooked the project. And so I, again, there were a number of comments about kind of reimagining the design review board. Part of that could be not having a public or not having a special meeting, but being part of the community meeting that's held early on, again, to get community feedback. And if those members attended that, I think that that's an interesting concept that I hadn't thought of before. The idea that there's other values that we have, not just design, but sustainability, and imagine if there was an element of it. Again, this is beyond the scope. So, but I think that is, there are ideas worth considering and kind of understanding, a bit of a root cause analysis, and particularly this idea that this was coming from a directive about making housing across all income levels more possible, but that it applies to not just housing is something that is striking me. So that's on the first part of it. The second part of it about EFS, thank you. I have no feeling one way or the other about EFS. But one of the things that strikes me in the materials is the other list of banned materials, including vinyl siding, and there was an active debate with our architects that are sustainability minded about the life cycle, the sustainability, vinyl siding, how sustainable it is hotly contested. Because it is very durable, and so over the course of its life cycle, that's one of the banned materials right now, and so that may be the argument for just striking the materials entirely. So that is not what is in this proposal, but I don't know if there are other things that are like that. And finally, one of the things from, I don't know if it was in the written communications or, again, in the design review board meeting, the idea that we have not made tons of changes to the standards or to the design review guidelines. They're not standards because they are voluntary only, but the guidelines. And it feels like there is some expertise about like changes that could be made. And so that would be ashamed to lose about like what in the guidelines were not working that could be pulled upon. So those are, I think that particularly if the design guidelines are to live on, and we talked about the benefit of having them live on, maybe not in their current format, but there is something else, would be useful to get that expertise.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. We'll go to Commissioner Abrams. Weich, then Councilmember.
I can be fast. I just will underscore everything Commissioner Mills said. I agree with all of that. And maybe I would say that for me, the combination of these two things in one motion feels difficult. So I think thinking about the role and the existence of the design review board is one thing, and then thinking about the downtown design guidelines and revamping those or modifying those feels like a different thing. So I don't know if I need to make an official motion, but maybe I just want to float the idea that we maybe take these two things up separately. But I wouldn't be prepared to vote for either of them at this moment for different reasons, many of which Commissioner Mills articulated. And I guess I am just curious to hear maybe more from you, Mr. Leonard, like in what way staff worked with the design review board to think creatively about how to address what city council was requesting, or if it feels a little bit like an axe instead of a scalpel situation to me. So I'd like to, if there were other conversations that happened or other meetings or consultations, I would like to hear about those. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Abrams. Commissioner Weich.
I just wanted to come back to Mr. Garber's question really quickly. Is that okay?
Yes, yeah, 100%.
So you asked about why it would take a month. So I'm reading from the new approach to economic development. It's the development document that John Fournier, our former deputy city administrator, authored. On page 47 and 48, he addresses that. And I think it has to do with the Open Meetings Act. So their meetings are conducted in compliance with that, which requires a 10-day notification, plus it requires staff time and minutes and other postings. So I think that adds to the timing because of the noticing. And up above, I think this is an issue that you have raised at our table. Mr. Fournier also talks about the citizen participation notification being in concert with that. And that's where he is estimating that the process can shave 2 to 4 weeks off of the process because of all of the noticing and the back and forth with that. So I don't have any comments about this. This comes from City Council. They want to get rid of this design review board, and I won't stand in their way.
Thank you. We're going to Councilmember Dish, then Commissioner Weatherby.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions. So about how many projects come before the design review board in a year?
It varies. Last year, I'm sorry, I should have had this data, but
No, you can
I would estimate last year might have been 5 to 6, and then I think we've probably had years where we had 2. So I would say on average probably 4 to 6 per year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And thank you, Commissioner Weich, for that reminder of what's in John Fournier's memo. So I feel as though we could make a good argument for not doing every single thing that is in John Fournier's memo. Yeah, we could. And then we will end up exactly where we started, which is that we are a city where it is very expensive to develop because we have a lot of regulations and a lot of requirements, many of them that don't even produce the outcomes that we want. I think that we are a city that is frenetically split in its attention to various goals, many of which are contraindicated, which is partly something that we are trying to solve in the revision of the comprehensive land use plan, because we have pieces of the plan that are at odds with each other. Even our sustainability and affordability goals can conflict with each other because of the limits on what buildings can do. And I really see this as a minor change. I would be, I believe, supportive. I know that I would be supportive of the Design Review Board helping to update the current guidelines. I imagine that's an evolving process. So it's not as though we will update them now in 2025 and then they will never need to be updated again. But still, we have the board. They, as a recognition of their expertise, which I imagine is considerable from the list of people that's on there, it'd be great if they wanted to take a crack at simplifying and updating those guidelines and thinking about the things that we are trying to accomplish as a city. But I think we need to focus. And I think we need to focus on taking delays out of the process and focusing our extremely lean staff on the things that it is most important for us to get done. And this, to me, feels like the stuffed animal that's taking up some room in my shoe cabinet. And it's okay to let it go. It's a small thing. And I don't mean to say that it's a trivial thing, but I'm saying that the work we're trying to do is hard, and we have to look for savings, and we can't keep asking to do more on top of everything else. So I am strongly in favor, and I don't speak for all of council, but this is a position that I will defend at council.
Thank you, Councilmember Dish.
Commissioner Lee, could I just?
Yeah, sure thing.
Sorry.
And then,
interrupt.
yeah.
Just a couple things that I want to respond to. I do have the numbers, and I'm sorry I was way off. Over the last 4 years, we've had 2 DRB applications per year. On average, over the last 10 years, we're at about 4 per year. So that's sort of the volume. There was, Commissioner Abrams, you talked about the conflation of the design guidelines, materials, and the DRB. I want to be clear, the materials that is in front of you is not design guidelines. Those are standards that were put into the UDC. So that is above and beyond anything that we have in our design guidelines document. So we can definitely bifurcate those regardless, but I wanted to be clear that those don't originate from the design guidelines. And then the conversation, just a little bit about timing. That resolution also talks about the citizen participation ordinance and improvements to that process, but there's some stacking that happens. So for projects that have to go to the DRB, as indicated, it's about a month because we have an application deadline. Staff puts together the staff report. We go out, we take photographs of the project. We have to comply with the Open Meetings Act. We notice that. We send out mailing to property owners and tenants within 500 feet of that project. So within a month, we need some space in order to accomplish all those goals. The citizen participation meeting also is intended to happen after the design review process. So where you have projects that are doing both of those, you have that month window of the design review board, and then the citizen participation process. And the citizen participation process has its own time implications. You have to send out notices to property owners. It has to occur at least 10 days prior to the application deadline for you submitting your site plan. So, and again, just to telegraph how I'll be thinking of that is that I think the citizen participation process is very effective at notifying people that something's happening in your neighborhood. I will also tell you, to the conversation about early feedback, oftentimes when you look at those citizen participation meetings, they're happening 10 days or 2 weeks prior to them submitting an application to us. And you were not seeing a lot of evolution of those plans in that time frame. Lastly, as far as the city goals, I know that's been a frustration point on both sides, like from numerous facets of like sustainability measures and what our requirements are on projects. We have been endeavoring to make sure we're bringing OSI staff to the earliest conversations that we have with petitioners, where we are trying to connect them with sort of our OSI staff as sort of almost built-in free consultants to brainstorm these ideas as early in the processes that we can engage them on those things. So I just want to, I'm not saying that that's the only way or the best way, but I didn't want that comment from you, Commissioner Mills, to sort of linger, that we are not trying to bring those aspects to projects as early as we can in some method.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Commissioner Weatherby.
Yeah, so I think just kind of following up on Councilmember Dish's comments, I think one of the things that I see with the design guidelines, and part of it is informed by living in Boulder for several years, is that Ann Arbor is quirky, and the design is quirky. And that is actually part of Ann Arbor's charm. It is not a city like Boulder where there is a very clear design aesthetic that we want to conform to. And so what I've seen, I mean, the members of the board have been really great, and the conversations have been great, and the expertise they bring is great, but the end result between the petitioners and the realities and the suggestions, I don't know, is that much better for the city than if we hadn't done that. I just think that some of, and whether it's a blank wall or I mean, we have guidelines that we will still conform to, but I just, I've never yelled at a TV as much as watching those meetings, because it's like, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. Or yes, we do want that. Like, I just think design is really subjective, and we are not clear as a downtown what designs we like. And we had at a football game, some people at our house, and they were talking about how they loved Ann Arbor because every building is different and it all looks different, and it's so cool because it's not cookie cutter. And I do think sometimes what we bring out of a big committee is almost more cookie cutter than if we had just let a developer do what they wanted to do. And I hate to say that because I know that's the opposite of what people want, but it's sometimes when we go for certain, we say we can't have this material or this design, or we have to reflect on what the individual people on these committees agree on, it ends up not being as different, as quirky, as forward-thinking, as of the time as maybe we actually do want in hindsight, because things change, times change, and these buildings reflect what they are. So I guess for me, I would say that we've tried the design guidelines, the design review board, and it's not a lot of developments. It's not a lot of, and maybe now is the time to say we've tried it, we've done good work, they've done great work, but I don't know that we need it anymore. I think we have different things that we want to achieve out of the limited time we have. So.
Got it. Thank you, Commissioner Weatherby. Do we have any other folks with comments on this particular item? Yes, Commissioner Norton.
Can I just ask, if there are 2 of these happening a year, how many projects, are they hotels? What are the kinds of projects they do apply to, and how many total do we have a year? Is this like a very small percentage of them, or is that most of the big projects?
So it is, like, for example, 721 South Forest, some of you might remember, that was not subject to design review because it wasn't in the D1 or D2 zoning district. So it tends to be larger scale projects that are downtown, not in a historic district. So we get sizable projects outside of that it doesn't apply to. Briarwood, that's a sizable project, not in that district. So, yeah, I guess I don't know how to answer that question other than what the requirements are for when it's invoked.
Yeah.
Well, Commissioner, and perhaps I can help with a little bit. The design review board I actually went to was for the Vic South project, which is on South University. It's right on East University. And the comments that I actually heard at that one was, hey, we want to preserve, we want to see some type of differentiating material, like a terracotta or some kind of an archway that emulates the feeling of the students coming through the arches. And so, and this is, think, you're coming out of like West Hall, East Hall, or, so you're coming out of like the, not naval architecture, complex systems area. You're going through the ugly and you're kind of coming on to South University. And so I actually thought that the design review board in that particular instance was pretty effective at telling them, hey, you should think about the student experience. This is something that they're going to have, for the next century, essentially. And so they actually did agree to, it's built, it's got a distinguishing corner as you're coming out of that archway. So that's the one project that I've actually think that there was some kind of a effective change that came out of it. Now, but as you've heard also, it's very limited in scope in terms of the applicable projects, 2 a year, right? So, and it's kind of strange because like 721 maybe could have or I don't know, but as far as it's really balancing again the tension between efficiency of do we have it, like how effective can it be? I have seen it be effective. It is also they're experts, right, in their own right. I have a great deal of respect for Wendy, for Kirk, and folks who have been a part of that process. And so, but really comes down to how effective is it? Is it causing an unnecessary burden, and is it applicable in the right ways that we want it to be? With all of that said, hopefully that answers your question about like how I've seen it be at least effective. Or been an impact.
It does, yeah. I'm coming to this late. I wasn't part of any of the conversations about this before, so I'm trying to come up to speed quickly. And I have heard that Ann Arbor is a frustrating place to develop because there are so many hoops that you have to hop through. I wonder if this is just kind of a one-off that we're trying to. Have there been studies, or are we in the process of evaluating all of the stuff together that's causing all of the delays and trying to do that in a thoughtful, systematic way? Or is this just kind of a let's kill this one and kind of not deal with the rest of the things? So I'm trying to just get a sense of where this fits into that larger effort.
Yeah, I could address that. If you look at some of those resolutions, it's being approached in a systematic way. But I just want to be clear. Like part of the reason for this one is some of you recently received emails saying, "Hey, are you interested in continuing to serve on the design review board?" And we were sending that out to the design review board, and I thought, just out of fairness to them in this direction, maybe this was one that we could get started on. But there is a whole series of recommendations that we'll be approaching as well. Some of the other ones in that resolution are, as I talked about, streamlining the citizen participation process to make that more concurrent with the development review process. That's, like I said, it's, I think, emphasizing notification more so than feedback. There are recommendations to eliminate public hearings requirements as part of site plans. Those are something that we do here, but it's not required by statute. And then there are more complex recommendations about, we have a pretty high expectation to get something to this table and get it approved. We ask for a higher degree of detail work than maybe some other communities require. And so that adds a significant cost barrier to get to this point. And it also has a bit of a self-sorting of who can participate in that process and who can't participate in that process. That's going to be a much more complex process improvement because it's going to be everything. It's one thing for me to address in the UDC, but it's going to have repercussions to our stormwater design and our utility analysis and our road networks. So there are a lot of things to look at. So both. This one is pretty well housed in the UDC, which is something that I think this board and the city council can consider it more independently. But there's a lot of other work to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Anything else, Commissioner Norton? I'm going to try to tease out kind of what I'm hearing right now, where we're at. So I actually heard from Commissioner Abrams, there was some, I want to actually focus on the EFIS and the materiality component of it, separate to the design review board, just from like a sense of like, hey, can we get some legibility on how people feel about that particular portion and whether we should tease it out? Could I get some feedback on where we stand on that materiality? Yeah, Councilmember Dish.
I actually wanted to ask Commissioner Mills if the longevity of vinyl is a good thing because the buildings that it's covered with last long, or is bad because when it goes into the landfill, it lasts forever.
I am not a vinyl siding expert, and this was hotly debated in our house. So this is what I understand, that it can be recycled. So it is plastic, right? I mean, it's a kind of, I'm not a chemist either. But it's that the maintenance that is required regularly, you don't have to replace it as much. And in terms of manufacturing it compared to other coverings that are manufactured.
Great, okay. That clarifies. It has been a steady drumbeat that I have heard in my time on council from more than one staff member, that the more we regulate, the more we raise price. And maybe I would think that EFIS isn't very pretty, but other people have told me that it has evolved. And so I think fewer regulations on materials, and those are some of the things that when staff reviews things, if there's something that looks really awful or is going to be really out of context, staff can suggest, maybe you could do that a little differently. Planning staff, that is kind of what they do. So I would prefer to make things simpler and not micromanage all the things that we can think of to micromanage.
Thank you. Commissioner Abrams.
Is that accurate? The planning staff is going to look at material choices on a facade and make recommendations for changing them?
So this direction would have staff compare the project to the design guidelines and report that. We compare materials now because it's part of the UDC.
Right, but if we eliminate, I think what Commissioner Dish is suggesting is the possibility that you would see a building not using EFIS in a nice way and say, hey, that doesn't look great. And I am suspicious that that would happen. So I would like some clarification on that.
Yeah, I don't think we wouldn't have a standard to be measuring it against it at that point.
And you don't have an architect on your staff, yeah.
I mean, we do staff reports and we present to the design review board. I want to be clear, that collective expertise is different than any individual on our team or my team's collective expertise. And I think the conversation here has been framed well. I think it's a question of, is it worth it? It's not to diminish the expertise that those people are bringing to it. It's what is the outcome. If this is foundational, that the data on the number of applications didn't seem right to me, and so when I ran a quick query, I'm sorry, I must have done an error. So here are the projects that were applied for to the design review board in last year: 611 Church, 303 Detroit Street, 601 South Main, 1209 South University, 610 South Forest, and 313 Braun Court. That's 6. So my apologies. Like I said, I was trying to run a query and I must have done it wrong.
All good. And in your defense, you did say 4 to 6 at the start. So, yes, Councilmember Dish.
Okay, so that's a good correction. There was something that I wanted to mention, which was our comprehensive land use plan envisions a larger D1.
Yeah,
and
a larger core.
Yeah, so there are going to be more things that would happen. And also we took away the restrictions on D1. We took away I forgot what they were called.
FAR.
Yeah, and we called them something, though. I forgot. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we took away the FAR restrictions, and so that's also been, that stimulated more projects. But I thought I remembered a conversation either with you or Mr. Delacourt, where it was suggested that some level of staff review could incorporate some of the things that are specified in the design review guidelines, which...
This would direct that, but I want to be clear, the material standards here are requirements in code.
Yes, and I understand that if we take them out, you
Yeah.
won't be able to say, don't use that.
Correct.
But if you are making an aesthetic review of
We
something,
can provide that just like the DRB could today, just like the DRB could say,
Yeah.
we would suggest terracotta or some other material at the entry of this building, and that is up to the petitioner to decide, that's a great idea, I'm going to do it, or I'm not going to do it.
right, and that's probably not going to end up significantly worse than some of the things that we have. Okay.
Is it?
contradictory, so I just really...
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Commissioner Abrams.
It still feels contradictory to me. So you're saying their planning will hire or
No.
retain a consultant who is an architect who has that expertise who could talk about terracotta? It's not within your
No,
purview.
and the design guidelines are often not that specific with material. So the design guidelines have things like fenestration, and they have variability of buildings.
I'm talking about the discretionary stuff that the review board does that is not binding.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, good.
The binding stuff that we have right now in code is you can't use EFS.
Okay,
You have to have a street wall height of
Yeah.
2 to 4 stories.
okay.
It has to be set step back.
But the discretionary stuff, you said that is a kind of expertise that does not exist in the planning staff currently, but
We do it now. We present a report, like we present a staff report to you about whether a site plan meets or doesn't meet the site plan requirements. We present a report to the design review board articulating where we think the project meets those design guidelines or falls short of those design guidelines. Just like you, sometimes the design review board's like, yep, staff, you got this right. Sometimes they're like, nope, staff, I don't agree with how you concluded this or that. And so it's a very similar process. The only difference is at this table, you have a set of laws and a responsibility to make a decision. They have the responsibility to provide advice, and then it goes from that room at the discretion of the property owner to decide if they want to incorporate it or not.
Okay. All right. Yes, Commissioner Hammerschmidt. I'm
Okay.
gonna wrap this up.
Yes, these
Yeah.
also kind of feel like two different things to me, even though they're not, they are related, but I think I support them both, but I have some questions, a couple questions, very fast questions, I promise.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that, they've done good work. I think that was a really good example, Chair Lee, that you brought up for the corner thing on the building on Southview. But I feel like we would gain, even if it's 6 projects, like probably the staff time that goes into preparing for these meetings. I mean, that's a lot of time with a limited staff. So I don't think it matters whether or not I'm supportive, because I think City Council gets the final say, but I would vote yes on that for sure. But what you just mentioned about these reports with the comparisons, would that just stop completely? Say we keep the materials and they have there's the guidelines, like.
No, they would be given to you.
Okay.
Got it.
One more thing.
Yes, yeah, of
Just
course.
on the materials, like I don't know about eliminating that. Vinyl siding is like really toxic. It's really it's PVC, like it's bad for the environment to like produce it. So like I'm fine. No, I have vinyl siding. I didn't put it on my house, but like I don't know that I'd strike it. I kind of don't want people to like be putting vinyl siding on buildings, not even for aesthetic reasons. I think like I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Weatherby said. Like aesthetics it's so subjective. Like I don't want it. Like there's architects conceivably designing these projects that are trained architects, and like I think we can have input, but like just I hope they don't design ugly buildings. But also like I'd rather have more of what we want in terms of housing units than like be quibbling over what the facade is like made of. But vinyl siding is really, really bad, and I would definitely want to keep prohibiting that.
Yes, Mr. Leonard.
I just want to reiterate, the materials changes was initiated by staff. If part of the tension is like concerns that like the convergence of both action on the design review board and changes to material, maybe it just feels like too much too quickly. I just want to be clear that just reemphasize that the material change was not something specifically directed by that resolution. It doesn't have to change. Of course, you can recommend whatever on any of these actions, but if it feels like too much too quickly, that would be another place that you could just say like, no, I want to keep those material restrictions as they are in the context of the new process to see where we end up.
Thank you. I think we're actually okay. The only question I have is going to be actually from Mr. Westfall, which is, have there been communication and coordination with the design review board about their feedback on how to streamline? Have they given any feedback on this particular item? I mean, other than what, they've written us tonight.
Yeah, Mr. Fournier and Mr. Delagorde have presented to the design review board this action. Again, I don't think it was presented I don't think it was like, how could we streamline it? It was being transparent with them about the direction that the city council was considering and directing. So I didn't attend that, so I don't know if that discussion was there, but what I have heard and seen from the correspondence is just like we talked about at this table, I think projects have changed from that conversation. That there is expertise there. Yep. Nobody's disputing either of those things. This proposed action is it worth it?
Yeah, streamlining it. Yeah, Commissioner Norton, and then I think
To that, are the developers who have to go through these asking that we get rid of this? Are they complaining about it? Is my first question. And secondly, for those 6 projects where they went through the process, did that substantially increase the cost of the project? Are they having to charge higher rents because they spent a month working with the design review board to affect those changes?
Yeah, so part of the recommendations in that report was based on interviews with developers and designers.
Yeah.
Yes. I wasn't part of those, but so I can't sit here and quote that, developer A, C, and D said and another thing, get rid of the design review board. But I will say, to the question, I don't know if it's the design of Southview. I'm guessing that material change was probably more expensive than what was originally proposed.
I think so, yeah.
I think that can impact it. It might be marginal, but I do think that I think the philosophy behind this direction is a nickel and dime to material cost there, and a nickel and dime to having to extend your process of having your consultant team on board for another month, a nickel and dime for another application fee. Those things do add up to increased cost. Market force, but markets are complex. I don't want to sit here and say eliminating this is going to have those units in the Village South would have been cheaper without that. I don't know that, but I can tell you that it's more expensive when the process takes longer.
Okay.
If I could just...
Yes, into the mic.
If I could just observe, I totally understand the desire to simplify the building process in Arbor and bring down the costs and all the struggles we're dealing with. Yeah. But things are getting built that are going to last a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand that design is in the eye of the beholder and different people have different tastes. There's some really ugly stuff that's been built in this city that we're stuck with for a really long time. And so the idea of having some kind of moment to stop and at least ask a developer, couldn't you do it a little bit better? That this is going to be something that we're going to live with for a really long time, long after you're gone. It's striking me as this is for a fairly small return in the cost, recognizing nickels and dimes it up. It seems like a radical thing to do. It's kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater is what it's feeling like to me. Mm-hmm. Saying that, I know that there's been a whole lot of discussion before I got here, so I'm also a little bit reticent to throw bombs now because I wasn't part of those earlier conversations. So I'm struggling with this myself. Yeah.
Sure. And I think what I would like to ensure that this is clear is that the design review board is elective and it's a suggestion, right? It's not mandatory. And so if there is a preservation of design dividends or architectural dividends that we're trying to preserve for the community, it has to be codified rather than through the design review board. And so I think there's also an element that there is, compounding, again, staff allocation of time and things of that nature. So I think when you weigh all of that, I think the reason that we are having some level of consternation is because it's not an easy decision one way or the other. So, but just wanted to make sure that it's not mandatory currently, right? Sean Havera did not have to, change that design, and Ron didn't have to change that design. But I think they did because they were like, actually, for the longevity, it probably makes sense for the building. It's been built. So just wanted to clarify that. And so Commissioner Weatherby and Councilmember Dish, did you want to add to that at all? Let's start with Councilmember Dish then.
I just want to answer Mr. Leonard's question. Is this too much, too fast? I want to say no, it's too little and too slow. I don't have any more time. I'm going to be, 65 soon. I would like Ann Arbor to meet its climate goals. I just leaned on a developer to put his solar on his roof now because we can't wait. I would like to move forward. I would like to make some changes that change the way we do business here. And it's okay if others have reservations. That's totally okay. But I'm just stating my strong position.
Thank you. And Commissioner Weatherby with the final comment.
I think one thing is, I know, Mr. Leonard, do you know when the design review board was established? Because I know it's been around. The first project I really was affiliated with it was in 2015. So it has to have at least been before that.
2011.
Is it 2011?
When they created D1 and D2.
Okay.
2011 D1, D2, just for, Commissioner White.
So,
Yeah.
So many of the buildings that we have that are newer and that we don't like actually did go through the design review board. And again, I'll go back to it's subjective. I don't like the roundness on the South U building because it's kind of cheesy to me because the sides aren't rounded. There's nothing. It's just looks like somebody threw a weird round corbel or whatever arch because somebody told them to, and it's not the same materials as above. And so it's like, I think it just is a very difficult thing to say that this has definitely made everything better. I think it is possibly made things different.
Thank you. With that, I think we can actually take these all together. So any other final thoughts? I'm just going to entertain just literally 5 seconds. Okay, we're going to go to roll call vote. I'm going to read the motion one more time just because I know it's been a little time. Okay, and again, as a point of process, this is going to City Council. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and City Council approve amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.17.6, 5.27.5, and 5.28.5 to eliminate the Design Review Board, modify the design review process to an administrative function, and revise the downtown building material regulation as proposed in the attached ordinance. Mr. Leonard.
Commissioner Norton.
Thanks a lot. Yes.
Somebody's got to go first.
Yes.
Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
No.
Commissioner Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
No.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Commissioner Weich.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. We are now moving on to other business, which there are none. Okay, we're going to move on to the final public comment. This is a second opportunity for individuals to speak up to 3 minutes on any issue, and we will first hear from those present, then remote participants. If you're to speak remotely, please press *9 or raise hand on Zoom. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will identify callers by the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available, and you'll hear an automated announcement saying that it's your turn to speak. And please mute background noises. and speak quietly. Or, I'm sorry, mute background noises and move to a quiet area. For all participants, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. I apologize. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? I tried doing it from memory. So.
Your memory was good. Yeah, as you know, I never mute my comments. So,
Mr. Garber.
thank you, Councilmember Dish, for pushing 215 South Main to putting on solar. It didn't make any sense to me, as I expressed, for them to say, well, we can't power the entire building, so why put any on, you know? So thanks for calling them out on that. And just in general, thank you all for the thoughtful discussion and for, I appreciate being heard when I come up here, and I clearly am, so I'm grateful for that, and it's nice to be back with you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none that's present, remote callers. Mr. Leonard.
I am going to slowly report that no hands are raised.
Okay. I always give it 3 seconds. Okay, with that, we will close public comment. All right, we're going to move on to agenda number 12, commission proposed business. Are there any? Yes, Commissioner White.
Okay, first thing, Mr. Leonard made us aware that our agenda for the March 11th working session is open. I'd like to recommend that we have the legal briefing with our attorney during that time, if it's possible, unless that has to be at a regular meeting.
We inquired about that today. The city attorney's office would like additional time to prepare for that. We asked for one of the either March 11th or March 18th. So I can't provide that in this time frame. Just as a background, we have a new assigned city attorney. We've had a retirement out of that office, so I can't do that.
Okay. My second thing was, is it possible for planning staff to provide us with guidance on the comprehensive plan? So the steering committee meetings have been canceled, the subcommittee meeting has been canceled, but we haven't received a memoranda or an email other than in the cancellation, there was a small note that said the plan would be forthcoming by the end of March. So it would be helpful for me to, and I'm just speaking for myself, to understand how we are going to embark on this endeavor, given that we're not actually meeting in the subcommittee, which is where I would have asked this question. And specifically, what I'm looking for is whether or not the draft plan that is coming at the end of March will come to the full table, or if it will come to the subcommittee, whether the draft is going to be presented in a way that we can provide feedback that might amount to votes in terms of like an actual record keeping of, yes, we like these things, no, we don't like these things, because I feel like through the process, some of that information has been left to interpretation, and I think that interpretation has been challenging, at least from my point of view. So any guidance that you could provide to us about this process, I think would be helpful just for expectations. And that can come as an email or it could come as a memo. I don't know that we have to have a full agenda item for it, but right now, I just don't know. And then I have one last thing, but I'll let you go because it looks like you were going to say something, Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you. And then finally, I'd like to draw our attention to the comment from Chris Vassels in our packet. He asked a very specific question, and I don't know whether someone is going to answer his question.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that he didn't get that question unanswered. Thank you.
Great. Any other agenda or proposed items? That takes us to the final item on our agenda, which is adjournment. Moved by Commissioner White, seconded by Councilmember Dish. All those in favor say aye. Aye.